Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Melissa Muir. Once more, I have joined up with Halstead Bead for another fun project. In this video, we are going to be making a necklace and matching earring set. I'm using several different components, including chains, soldered elements, tube settings, crystals, and a few other little fun items. Let's jump in and see how it's done. In this video, I'm going to be using multiple elements. First, I'm starting off with these half moon shapes in 2 different sizes. I also have flowers in 3 different sizes, some 2mm settings that I'm going to be putting into the little flowers, some oval jump rings, 3 different styles of chains, and finally, I'm going to be working with this marquee shape of earrings. So first, I'm going to decide which elements to solder onto my half moon pieces. Also, notice that on some of these little flowers, they do not sit flat. They have a shape to the back of them. I'm going to hold the little piece in my tweezers just so that I can kind of hold on to it and file the back of that. That will give me a nice flat spot, which will then allow the piece to sit flat, which is what we need for soldering. To prep the half moon pieces, I'm going to take a scrubby or Scotch-Brite pad and just kind of clean up the surface a little bit. Next, because it is sterling silver, I like to put it into a boric acid and alcohol wash. This will act as a fire scale preventer. To prep everything for soldering, first I need to apply my flux. I'm going to flux each of the different pieces. One of the things I like to do is to dry that flux just a little bit so that my solder doesn't bubble out of place while it begins to dry. Next, place your solder right on those flat spots that we've just created, and then I'm going to pre-flow the solder so that I can then sweat solder each of the elements onto my little half moon shape. I apply only just enough heat for that solder to begin to flow. Now on these little flowers, it is okay that the solder has not completely filled in the back of this. Next, I'm going to place each one of the elements onto one of our half moons or half circle pieces, but I am also going to flux these first to help the solder flow. You want to spend a little bit of time just to make certain that everything is where it needs to be and positioned properly. Next, I'm going to heat the piece up. Now, it can be a little bit difficult to see when the solder flows on some of these, so if you watch the stages of your flux, you should be able to tell when you are at that soldering temperature. You will notice that I use my soldering pick to help position each of these flowers, and that also makes it so that I can set them where they are nice and flat. We want to repeat this process for each of the different elements on our pieces. Once they're all finished, I quench and pickle them to remove all of those oxides. Now we're going to work with the small half moon pieces. These are going to each receive a tube setting in the center of this flower. So to begin, I'm going to flux, and again, I'm going to dry that flux with my torch, now placing each of my tube settings. These are 2mm tube settings that have a seat pre-cut into them. Place a little piece of solder into each one, and again, just carefully reposition to make certain that we are where we need to be. Once again, I'm going to bring in my heat and apply that, watching for my solder to flow. Once that solder flows, get your torch out of there and move on to the next. Now that we have all of our elements soldered, I'm going to use the oval jump rings to attach the corner of each of our half moon pieces. When you open a jump ring, make sure you swing that open rather than pulling it open so as to not damage the shape of our jump ring. Next, I'm going to set my stones into these tube settings. So you also want to make certain that it's nice and flat. Never set it unless you have that flat. So once I check this, I'm going to put it back on my bench block, use a setting punch and hammer, and then just set that stone. Give it a nice little extra rub for a burnish. Now that we have each of our pieces soldered and the stones all set, it is time to assemble our earrings. I'm going to be using 3 different chains, 2 of which are called a Saturn chain. These feature a small bead placed intermittently in between the chain. First, I want to lay this out and determine the length of chain that I'm going to need. So I'll lay this chain out, cut it, and then, like I said, I can use this to cut the next piece. Now that I have my 2 pieces that are the same length, we can then begin to assemble. I'm going to open the jump rings on each of the corners and attach my chain on both ends. I'll repeat that for both earrings. Next, I need to determine the placement of the other half moon. And I'm going to take it just above this little bead right here. So again, I'm going to open the jump ring on my piece and insert it into the desired chain link, close that up, and again, I'm going to repeat for both earrings. Now we have both earrings done. Next, let's do the necklace. We're going to use the larger Saturn chain for this. On the necklace, I am going to reverse my pieces. So the small half moon is going to be on the bottom, whereas the large half moon will then be further up. I'm not going to make the entire chain out of the Saturn chain, but rather I will use a cable chain to complete it. As a final finish, I've applied liver of sulfur and gone over it with a little bit of pumice powder just to bring out those highlights.